Now, what we're going to start talking about is God's design for us. I would submit that God has created us for intimacy. First with Him, and then horizontal intimacy within marriage, but in all relationships. It looks a little different from marriage and others, but I submit to you these four fundamental aspects of who we are as human beings. Of an intellectual intimacy, to be able to have a discussion of ideas, thoughts, that we are intellectual beings as a part, and to have a relationship with somebody that you can just talk about whatever, ideas, thoughts, and that's an important part of full intimacy. Clearly spiritual, as spiritual beings, to have spiritual intimacy where you can discuss spiritual things and you can impact and relate with God together. This has its highest fulfillment in marriage and human relationships, but in all relationships, that's part of the purpose of us coming Sunday mornings, is to experience spiritual intimacy with the rest of the body, because we're supposed to be connected to the greater body. God never intended for our marriages to fulfill all of our relational needs. It can't. Husbands, there's some relational needs that you have that only a man can meet. And your wife is just not equipped. And you're grateful for that. That was supposed to be a joke. And likewise, wives, there's some relational needs only a woman can meet. And you can try to get that from your husband, and it's not going to be met. Because you're supposed to be, as a marriage, you're supposed to be connected to a larger body that has women in it. But emotional intimacy is the third aspect, because we are emotional beings. We have an emotional side. To connect and experience life on an emotional level is an important part of intimacy. But then on a physical intimacy level as well, which is both sexual and non-sexual. I was specifically talking about marriage. There are some parts of sexual intimacy that's only designed to be expressed within marriage. It's by God's design. And I'm going to say a little bit about understanding God's design. In my office, I have a picture of a locomotive. I talk with couples all the time about it. About a block from my office is train tracks going through downtown Conroe. Locomotive on that train tracks can do incredible things. Hold hundreds of tons behind it. But if you take that same train, that locomotive, and you go 1 mile the opposite direction to Interstate 45, and you put it down in the middle of 45, it'll move, but it's going to tear up the pavement. It's not going to pull hundreds of tons of all of our goods, and it's going to make a huge mess. That locomotive, I use it in a lot of different areas of illustration. But with regard to sexual intimacy, God designed it with tracks. That train doesn't get to decide wherever it wants to go. The locomotive has choices along the way. See, within the tracks, there's choices. But it's designed to go on the tracks. Anything other than what it's designed to do will create a mess. And we see that within physical intimacy. God has designed it for a purpose. That the highest forms of expression in physical intimacy are intended to be between a man and a woman who have covenanted before God and a body to be faithful until death, to honor God in everything, and have given everything to them, that have built a significant level of trust. And that's the tracks. It does incredible things. But even 1 foot off the tracks, that locomotive's going to make a mess. When you understand God's design and you choose to abide by it, because God's given us the ability to take our locomotive off the tracks. He's given us a free will where we can decide to do what we want to do. He tells us, you really want to keep it on the tracks. You really want to do this the way I've designed it to do. And for reasons that God himself knows, when he created us and gave us a free will, he gave us the ability to sin. But if you imagine taking that locomotive and putting it in I-45, how easy would it be for you and me to put a locomotive back on the train tracks? I can't lift a locomotive. In a similar way, when we mess up, when we go outside of God's design, we have to have God's help to put it back. But the God who is all-powerful has the right to say, you messed it up, you fix it. And he would know we can't fix it. But what the incarnation is all about is God saying, I'm going to come help you, because I know you can't do it. And God coming and lifting our locomotive and putting it back on the tracks. And saying, okay, I'm going to make it new. I'm going to fix the wheels, I'm going to do that. Keep it on the tracks this time. Understand that. Because within physical intimacy, there's sexual and non-sexual touch. I'm not going to go in greater depth, but to understand, our society has equated intercourse with intimacy. As husbands and wives, you see that's one part of it, but it's one small part. Intimacy is so much bigger than just intercourse. And understanding that means there's inevitably times where one part is just not going to be possible. If intimacy is equated to only one part, then inevitably many times throughout the course of our marriages and relationships, intimacy's gone. But if we see it the way I believe God has designed it, then if one area goes down, you can increase another area. Like physical intimacy depends on how we feel physically. If you've ever had the flu, a really bad case of the flu, probably don't feel a whole lot like physically intimate. But it's at those times, if you focus on emotional intimacy, I'm not saying this has ever happened, but theoretically, if a person with long hair got the flu and is throwing up over the toilet, gets so sick, and a husband were to hold her hair back and put a cold rag on her head, probably that relationship's going to feel closer at the end of that. It's not really physical intimacy. That was an emotional intimacy that grew when physical intimacy couldn't. If you see each one of these areas as sometimes they're going to be lower in one area, they can be increased in another area. If you look over the life cycle, there's some things, and I'm getting ready to turn 50 on Christmas Day. There's some things my body just can't do now that it used to be able to do when I was 25. I'm guessing 25 years from now, when I'm 75, there's even more things that my body won't be able to do. Now, I'm not just talking physical intimacy, I'm just saying, because I see a lot of smirks on your face. But yes, there's some things you can't do when you get older and older. But I tell you, to be able to have an intellectual intimacy, Terry and I have some really deep conversations. Terry, if you don't know Terry very well, she is a theologian. She exhausts me at sometimes, and just like oh, by the way, and she asked this question, I'm going like, my mind just blew thinking about that question, and she's just, that she thinks really deeply at times. Our ability to have deep conversations has really grown over the years, because it wasn't always there. But to see full relational intimacy is what God's created us for. Now, in order to have that, we can't do what comes natural to us. Because what comes natural to us as fallen, sinful people is selfishness. I'm pretty sure every parent in here can agree with me. We never had selfishness classes for our kids. We never sat them down and say, this is the way you grab somebody else's toy and you schwack them on the head. They learned that. We have had lots of classes, and we're still having some classes at times, that if you grab Billy's toy and schwack him on the head, he's not going to have anything to do with you. None of the kids are. If you do what you just want to do, nobody's going to want to be around you. So as humans, if we do what comes natural, it won't create intimacy. It'll create isolation.